Munich to commemorate the Busby Babes. I'm here with a long-time Manchester United fan, Chris. This is my first time here. I can feel something in the air. It's something special. You can understand what's happened here. Just give us an insight into your experiences and your thoughts and feelings on what's happened.
Well, my experience was I was at school in Dublin when the actual crash happened. Came out, found out that my lifelong hero, Billy Whelan, had been killed in the plane crash. And for me, to move to Manchester and be next to Manchester United was just unbelievable. And I've been to nearly every game since 1959 when I came here, watching the Reds, and we go to the games home and away, and it's just brilliant.
How's it going, guys? Welcome to the United Stand, and we've got a bit of a special today, discussing the Munich disaster. It's about that time of the year where we're starting to commemorate and remember. I'm here with Chris, who I met out in Munich for the anniversary a couple of years back. Really interesting chat with yourself. First of all, thanks for coming on and having a chat with us. Really appreciate that.
No problem.
Let's start, Chris, about that Busby Babes side for a lot of youngsters out there, or maybe even fans who haven't been following us as long as that, who don't quite understand just who they were, how good they were, and how good they were going to be.
Well, as a kid growing up in Dublin, we followed the Busby Babes because of Billy Whelan. He was a local lad to us, lived a couple of miles down the road from me, and our local team, where Billy Whelan played for them for a while, for Home Farm, and he had the interest of all the kids around there playing for this great team, that they were winning everything and looked like they were going to go on and win the European Cup. And in Dublin as kids, we literally had nothing. We watched them on a 12-inch television screen that one of the lads down the road had, because none of the families around us had.
It's like everyone had to gather around at someone's house and go watch it.
When the game was on, everybody was his best friend, and they were all in his house watching it on this miniature TV, really. And it was absolutely brilliant, but it's like black and white watching it through a snowstorm. And we loved it. And like I say, Billy Whelan was our hero. He was a great goal scorer. He was our idol, and ongoing, he got injured, he was out of the team, but that didn't matter to us. We all wanted to be Billy Whelan. And then one day I'm coming out of school and there's this thing, the headlines everywhere on the newspapers, like plane crash, Manchester United.
What did you think then? How did that make you feel? What did you think? Oh, probably a little minor detail, or they'll be all right. Or did you realise the magnitude of it when you first heard it?
In those days, if it was a plane crash, it was a major disaster. It wasn't, they didn't have the stuff that they have now. But we came out and we were like just digging for information. We couldn't get anything. All we got was this late broadcast that, late bit in the papers that there'd been a plane crash and a lot of the United people had been killed, so we were all devastated, and then we were scratching around looking for news and all that, and it was a couple of days before we got any real picture of what had happened. But then when we found out Billy had been killed, it was like devastation, it'd be like somebody saying Cristiano Ronaldo, or it was.
And that just on that, because I want to put that into context, because I think a lot of people who might not know who Billy Whelan is, United fans, it's interesting you said there. That's at that time it was the equivalent of like you said, Ronaldo being on the plane and God forbid him losing his life.
Yeah, well, I'm using Ronaldo as an example, because these players, especially the likes of Duncan Edwards and that, they were just massive to us. They were gods, because in those days they were what you looked up to all the time. It was just, and in Ireland especially, if you got these heroes, they were really heroes, because we had very little over there in those days, you know.
And once the crash had happened and the severity was realised worldwide by the football world, especially Manchester United fans. I mean, what was the aftermath like? You know, we're talking about players were waiting to see, they're hanging on for their lives. We know that some at Busby were obviously badly injured. You know, we had Bobby Charlton trying to save people. You know, what was the aftermath like, and where we went from there?
Well, we were just getting sketchy bits of news, you know. It wasn't like today where you've got instant. You waited for newspaper reports, you know. That's how we got the news, because, like I say, there was no TV. You listened to the news on the radio, and it was just sort of clutching at straws and hanging on to every word that people were saying, kind of thing, because you didn't know what was going on. And then you'd hear that, oh, Matt Busby is in an oxygen tent and he's had the last rites and this, you know, and it's just devastation, really, you know, because and you're thinking, well, there's not going to be a team, and you know, where do we go from here?
And then talking about where we go from here, can you remember the first game after that disaster, in terms of how we bounced back? I know that I've read a book. You know, we had to get players in from all over, and we did struggle. It was an uphill struggle. Jimmy Murphy took the reins.
Thank God for Jimmy Murphy. That's all you can say, because he gathered a team together, and I mean, I don't, like I say, there was no TV or anything. We didn't see the game, but from what we heard of the game, you know, it was like just a massive thing where the crowd carried the team through, and then, like, to get to the cup final was absolutely unbelievable, you know, and everyone in the world, I imagine, was willing them on to win the cup that day. Everyone except Nat Loftus and the referee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it was, you know, and then it just went on from there, you know, and the next season they scratched the team together and really struggled, and if you think about it, like, although when Busby came back, he brought in some great players, the likes of Dennis Law, Paddy Crerand. They were nearly relegated in '63 when they won the cup, but you could see, like, the beginnings of the team, and then, like, in '64 when Bestie came along, it was unbelievable. You couldn't wait for it Saturday afternoon, because that's what it was, Saturday afternoon, to come down again and see Bestie and them. It was just unbelievable.
How good were those players post the Munich air disaster? You know, you talk about your Laws, you talk about your Best, you talk about your Bobby Charltons, who you said, you know, he'd already come through, but Billy Wright had kind of kept him out the team. How good were these players?
As kids, you know, you couldn't see. All you could see was this dazzling array of players doing their thing, and you know, you were just mesmerised by them. That's how good it was. And you know, people say to me, well, you know, in the modern era, any one of them players would have walked into any team. That's how good they were, you know. And when you think that players like Bobby Charlton, Billy Foulkes, they went on for years afterwards and carried on, and they went on to win the European Cup and everything else. That's really how good they were, you know. And people today still talk about Bobby Charlton. Bobby Charlton won the World Cup, and in 1970 he could have won the World Cup again, but Ramsey took him off in that game against Germany, you know. And if Ramsey hadn't, everybody says, if Ramsey hadn't taken Charlton off, which released Beckenbauer, then England could have won the World Cup in 1970 as well. That's how good Bobby Charlton was. You know, so you can't say what for me, when Bobby Moore lifted that World Cup, that would have been Duncan Edwards. You know,
that's another thing I want to talk about is Duncan Edwards. I mean, any United fan who knows their history, who's read up about it, yes, we're from a different era, but it's important to read up about these things and do your research. Know what a good player he was, what a sensational player he was, and what he was forecasted to become. I mean, just give us a few words on Duncan Edwards and what he could have been.
How young he was when he died, and how much he'd achieved in the game and all that, you know, and what he'd achieved for England as well as for United. That, you know, the sky was the limit. That's how we saw it.
What sort of player was he? Was he quick? Was he skillful?
Well,
I mean, I'm just thinking of the younger viewers out there thinking, who is Duncan Edwards? What if you was to sum him up as a player? What type of player was he? What was he like?
He was a really big, powerful player, very, very skillful, but nobody could move him off the ball. Nobody. He was too strong. He was massive, you know, and to see him when he was like 19, 20, 21, the way he was playing, it was just unbelievable.
And he was forecasted for great things, wasn't he?
Yeah. And like I say, he was 22 when he died, and he would have gone on to captain England, like I say, to at least I would have imagined two World Cups. You know, that's the way we saw it.
On what happened, how important is it for Manchester United fans, young, old, middle-aged, whatever the age, to understand that part of the history of this football club, and how important is it now?
Well, what you have to realise is that Matt Busby, in his vision, opened up the European game to English
Everyone was
fans.
against it, weren't they? He was the first one to say, right, we'll have a bit of that.
The reason for the crash was Alan Hardiker had told Busby that he had to have the team back here for Saturday. They had to be back 24 hours before the game, and that was the urgency to get the team back. And you could say that it was that urgency that made the pilot attempt the takeoffs, because that's how it was. And they were so against United going into Europe that it was that sort of urgency to get back to because there were going to be docked points if they didn't turn up, or if they turned up late. So
that pressure on them to actually get back.
To get back. So that's how much the Football League was against them going into Europe.
And Jimmy Murphy, so Matt went against that grain, didn't he?
Against that, yeah. He said, no matter what you say, we're going into Europe. And
we want to be the best in the world, we want to be the best in Europe, we need to play against the best in Europe.
That's right. So it was that sort of pressure on the club, but Busby said, well, no matter what you do, we're going to carry on with this game, you know, so yeah. And it was that sort of vision that took us into Europe in the first place.
Into the current day, Chris, I mean, you look at where it is now. I mean, I want to get your take on this because it would be really interesting. I find it fascinating as well, especially for fans like yourself who've been going since the 70s, should I say?
Yeah,
the 70s?
The 50s.
The fifth.
59.
Been going, was that 1959, Chris's first game. Unbelievable. When you see how it is now, I know we're a different breed of fan now. There's all social media out there. It's easy to react to things. It's easy to have knee-jerk reactions. Managers are coming and going. Owners are taking money out of the club. All of that jazz. When you look at Manchester United now, how do you feel as a fan who knows what Manchester United was back then, experiencing it in the terraces from 59 onwards? What's your thought on where we are as a club now?
Well, obviously we feel a bit sick at the way it's going, and hope for better things. Hopefully Ollie can sort it out, but the way things are at the moment with the way it's been run, it's been totally mismanaged as far as we can see. You know, every time we go for a player, it's a saga. It's a 6-month saga because and everything's in the newspapers, whereas all the other clubs are just going in and buying players, and you know the deal is done as soon, you know. But United, for some reason, I don't know whether it's to try and create more publicity or what, every player that they go to sign, Haaland, Fernandes, you know, even Pogba and all that. It's months. It's not something that they do straight away, is it? You know, so.
We're just not operating as an efficient club, are we?
Not at all. And the people who are running it have no idea about football. Maybe Ed Woodward's great at putting deals together for sponsorship and stuff like that, but he certainly can't put a deal together for players and stuff. He just doesn't seem to have the.
I want to ask you, does it? When you hear some fans saying this is awful, this is the worst I've seen it, it's a disgrace, you know, and there's some valid points. You know, we are officially in our worst start for 30 years. You know, we're breaking all sorts of unwanted records at the minute. It's not good, but from a fan having experienced live in the flesh what you experienced back then and living through that, do you look at those days and be like, it's never been as bad as that. I've seen us nearly get relegated. I've seen us get relegated. Do you know what I mean? Do you look at that and think, well, it's not that bad, or is it heading that way?
The fans of my era will tell you that some of the best times they had was when we were in the second division, because the football we played was outstanding with Tommy Docherty's team, 2 wingers, 2 great strikers, you know, and we were always nearly there, but never there. When we got promoted, like FA Cups and all that kind of stuff, you know. When you think about it, we stopped Liverpool doing the treble in '77 when we won the FA Cup. But we were always the nearly team and never quite there until Fergie came along. But in the 70s, some of the football was dreadful. And when we got relegated, it was like the bottom dropping out of your world. But it was used to our advantage, really, because from that we built a really good team, you know, with Greenough and Macari and Gordon Hill and Stevie Coppell and Willie Morgan, you know, people like that. And we had a great, the football they played was absolutely great. Stormed through the second division back into the first division as it was then, and it was brilliant.
To finish off, Chris, where do you think this United side's going to finish this season? Do you think we can get $1 million question? Do you think we can get top 4? Do you think we can get some players in January?
If we finish 17th, we'll be.
Don't put it into the atmosphere, Chris. Don't. I know you've seen us bounce back then, but honestly, mate, we don't want to be in the Championship.
No, you've got to look at. Ollie's been very unfortunate with the injuries that we've had this season, you know. But on the other hand, we've got rid of 9 players in the past 2 years and not replaced them, you know. So I don't know whether it's Ollie that's been hamstrung or whether the club just don't want to spend the money. It's very, very disheartening. You know, that's all I can say, you know.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, we have a positive end to this season. Surely we've got to pick up a run of wins from somewhere.
You know, the way you look at it is, you know, if we'd have had somebody who could put the ball in the net against Liverpool on Sunday, we could have beaten them, because they certainly didn't outplay us, you know, and especially when Mata came on, because but then we come up against the mediocre teams and
lose. Comfortably lose.
We don't do it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
We beat City. You know, we go down to Arsenal and play the way we did at Arsenal. It was just
we just can't get any consistency.
Diabolical. There's no consistency in the team. But again, you say, well, we have the young players coming through, the likes of McTominay and that, Rashford. You know, and they're all on long-term injuries, you know, and this is part of the team where you can't really see the development because we take 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It's that kind of thing.
Guys, I've really enjoyed my chat with Chris. Honestly, it's really important, especially around this time of year, that you do. Just, you know, you guys watch the channel, you guys watch YouTube, you're all familiar with it. Type the Busby Babes in on YouTube. You haven't got to read 100-page encyclopedia on it. There are deep books out there on it, but you know, it is easy to find out and do some research on just how good that team was and what a big part of this
Yeah, and
history, isn't it?
a lot of them were just local lads, you know. So
Encourage them, Chris. Tell them,
Yeah.
do your research.
Oh, yeah.
Chris is
Yeah,
saying,
do
get
it.
it done. Find
You know,
out about your history.
When we were kids, we used to get on the bus coming down to Old Trafford, and the players would be on the bus. You know,
Imagine that now.
you can't imagine it, no.
Imagine sitting next to
Yeah,
Paul Pogba,
yeah.
saying, "Excuse me, it's going to get off here. Could you just press the bell?" You know, do you know what I mean? Imagine that. Anyway, Chris, thank you so much for spending
No,
time
you're
with us.
welcome. No.
Keep supporting the boys. I know you will. You've been doing it for so long, and hopefully
Just
we get
getting
to see
ready
some good times.
Go to Munich again, so
Yes.
make the pilgrimage. So,
Cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it, mate.